Hi, everyone. Happy Thursday. Happy sunny Thursday. It is a beautiful day here on Nantucket, and we are always thrilled with Food for Thought lectures, but we are especially delighted to be able to be transported far, far away today and have a wonderful speaker, author, adventurer in our midst. So, before we get started, I'm just going to ask you to silence your cell phones. Take a second, make sure that they're silenced. For those of you who are new to Food for Thought, thanks for coming. We do this every Thursday, and it's going to be happening through May 1st, and we've got some really, really great speakers. And to our regulars, nice to see you. If you do need to use the restrooms, as you've noticed, there's a little bit of construction going on outside. If you do need to use the restrooms, please just exit through the back door and use the museum shop restrooms. They're just to the left. Please don't use the main ones. I'm sorry, but I'm told that they're working through it and it'll be lovely in time for Daffy Day, so fingers crossed. But without any further ado, let's talk about the gentleman to my left. Rob Cocuzzo came to Nantucket when he was 17 to work as a fisherman. After 3 years as first mate, he became a certified captain and ran charters on the shallow water flats off of Tuckernuck and the deeper waters off of the South Shore. It was during one of these charters that Rob met a travel writer, and he was inspired to put down his fishing rod and pick up his pen. That winter, he spent 4 months traveling, backpacking, alone in South America, where he devoted himself to writing. Rob then moved to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and he helped start an online ski magazine and began writing professionally. A writing position at N Magazine brought him back to Nantucket, and today he's the editor of that publication. Rob spent this past winter living in a remote skiing village in the French Alps, and he continued research for a forthcoming book. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome my friend, my colleague, Nantucket's very own Rob Cocuzzo.
I'm thrilled to be here today. Thank you guys very much for coming today. I know it's a beautiful day out, but on this day especially, I'm happy to be here talking about this. So I guess to start it off, we have to go back in time a little bit before we get to my trip this winter. I guess you could start in my parents' basement when I was about 13 years old, obsessing over ski films growing up. And my folks put me in skis at the age of 3, and then they gave me the great gift of enrolling me in an after-school ski program. So every Wednesday, I would schlep these rickety old skis that my dad bought and a pair of my mom's old ski boots to a bus, and they would drive us out to Western Mass, and I would ski on this little molehill of a mountain called Neshoba Valley. And that was the beginning of it, and continuing to be a skier to this day. It's my main passion. And watching these ski films, what was most captivating to me wasn't exactly the skiing. Skiing was obviously of interest to me, but what was really interesting to me was the life beyond skiing. You know, what was it like to live in a mountain town? What was it like to step outside your house and be able to jump in the car for 5 minutes and get to a ski resort? I mean, for me, you know, my formative years of growing up skiing were, you know, waking up at 5 in the morning with my dad yelling to get in the car, and, you know, we're making sure we don't forget our gloves, and, you know, you drive 3 hours up to the White Mountains. And so the idea of being able to just step out the door into this world was just so utterly foreign to me growing up. And as I watched these ski films, I just kind of imagined that life, and I thought, okay, well, one day I'm going to do that. That's going to be, you know, something I'm going to do. And watching these ski films, one particular individual came out and kind of caught my attention. His name was Doug Coombs. And I vividly remember the footage of Doug that caught my attention. The footage is shot from a helicopter. It's just pounding off this big peak. I mean, a peak that looks just too terrifying to climb. You know, the idea of skiing, it seems just absolutely ridiculous. And helicopter's pounding, and you see this teeny little dot coming down from the peak. And the footage kind of zooms in, and Coombs comes into view, and he's wearing this one-piece, flamboyantly red ski suit. And he's coming down this peak, and the thing looks so steep that you can just see his shoulder rubbing up alongside the mountain beside him. I mean, he looks like a surfer buried in the barrel of a wave, just like so massive that the mountain looks like it's just over him. And every one of his turns is exploding these like little mini avalanches are coming down beside him. So it looks like there's just white water coming down below him. And amidst this chaos, which just looks absolutely insane, he's in this peak that looks like out of a fairy tale. Amidst all this, Doug Coombs is coming down with just such skill and such ability, such bravado, that watching him ski, for me, transcended athleticism. I mean, watching him ski was like watching a genius at work. I mean, it just looked like, you know, this is what this man was meant to do. And he had absolute confidence, so much so that a misstep in this terrain would be the end. And to perform in this terrain, you just have to, you're just not a regular skier. Your ability is beyond sport. And so as a kid, I'm watching this, and I'm absolutely mesmerized. I mean, I've seen that, thousands of times, hundreds. I mean, I've seen that. That's burned in my memory. That footage is like the footage that I was a little kid sitting in my basement in Arlington, Massachusetts, watching this on a teeny TV and thinking, like, there's another world out there. Like, that's out there somewhere, and this guy is just getting after it. And that was, by the way, most of that footage is all shot in the Chugach mountain range in Valdez, Alaska. Someone asked. And as a sidebar, that's part of Doug Coombs' legend is he went out to Alaska in the 90s. He won the World Extreme Ski Competition there, and he pioneered heli skiing in the Chugach mountain range. That's part of his legacy, just one chapter. I mean, the guy had an amazing life. So, watching this as a kid, all these things are kind of in the back of my mind growing up. Doug Coombs is a figure in my mind, someone who kind of epitomizes the sport in my mind. And we fast forward now to about 7 years later. I moved to Jackson Hole, Wyoming to finally pursue my childhood dream of living in a western ski town. And I got to do a lot of this stuff, which was great, skiing deep powder. And I've got the chance to experience what it was like to walk outside your door and be in the mountains. And as someone who grew up by the ocean, it was a complete altering experience and interesting. So you do a lot of this stuff, and then I learned about the life behind skiing, which is a lot of this stuff, hanging out and drinking beers with friends, and experiencing that community, which, there I, as we talked about, started a magazine there. But the big lesson I actually learned that changed my life was I was living in Jackson Hole, and for whatever reason, I didn't know this until I moved there. I moved to Jackson Hole, and I found out that Doug Coombs had actually grown up only 20 miles away from me in Massachusetts. And not even that, he also learned to ski on the same little molehill I grew up skiing on. He grew up skiing at Neshoba Valley. He went to school in Bedford, Massachusetts. There he is right there, strapping young lad. You can read in the bottom of that's his high school yearbook photo. There's no such thing as too much snow. So yeah, he grew up 20 miles away from me. And the discovery really blew me away because I thought, how does this guy go from skiing like a 240-foot molehill, a teeny little mountain? How does he go from there to becoming the king of the big mountains? I mean, he is arguably the greatest skier to ever live. I mean, his ability was beyond anything. I mean, how did that happen? Like, what sequence of events led him from there, where I started, to there, where, it was just a place in my imagination. And so began this 3-year quest to follow his life from where I grew up, skiing in Shoba, to Jackson Hole, and then ultimately to Le Grave, France, which was where I was this winter, and where Doug Coombs not only lived, but where Doug Coombs ultimately died in Le Grave. And this is actually Jackson Hole right here. We'll move to the next one. So what I'm here to talk to you about today is not really about skiing. It's not really about the mountains. It's really not about Le Grave. What it's about is the energy of a human being, and it's how that energy kind of can lead you places. It's the energy that all connects us all through time and space, and I believe it's the energy that's been kind of propelling my project to this point. To give you a sense of what I'm talking about, we have to stay in Jackson Hole for a second. I decided that I want to write this book on Doug Coombs. And in Jackson Hole's a very hardcore ski community. They're the ones that really excel there, you don't really see. They just kind of float off into the white, and they're on adventures that you can't even imagine. But more so, they're very, very protective of the legacy of that place, and they're very protective of their heroes. And there's never really been a hero in Jackson Hole quite like Doug Coombs. I mean, this man epitomized what that place became. I mean, he was the poster boy for it, and where he went kind of was the credibility for that mountain, and he really cut his teeth there. So I knew that I couldn't waltz into Jackson Hole and say, "Oh, look, I'm Rob from Boston. I'm going to write a story about your hero. Like, can you sit down and talk to me?" This wasn't going to happen. And so I then realized the process I had to take was to be in the community, meet people, kind of learn more about who Doug Coombs was, and also, for me personally, it was a time to try to see if I had the confidence, the ability to actually write this story, because I knew it was a book that was going to be written, and I wanted to be that guy, but frankly, I didn't know if I was supposed to be that guy. This man in the ski world was so huge and so important. He was a pioneer of so many aspects of the sport, made it evolve, but even more so, this man possessed such tremendous energy. I mean, what his claim to fame was, beyond all the movies, beyond all the the covers he was on in magazines, his legacy was in these people that he took skiing. I would talk to these people, and their faces would just light up, and they wouldn't talk about the death. It was about his life, and he imparted this energy into them. He imparted this confidence into them to be able to be in the mountains and ski things that they didn't think that they were capable of. So I knew that it was a very sensitive thing, and I knew that I had to be very respectful, and I knew I had to earn their respect, earn my knowledge. So I spent the next 2 seasons in Jackson Hole not even talking about the book. I didn't utter it at all to anyone but my family. I just knew in the back of my mind that eventually I was going to write this book, and I needed to take these little teeny incremental steps, meeting all these right people to get to that point. As Marjan said, I started an online magazine with a group of friends. We focused on primarily on avalanche safety. We used Google Earth to map out slide paths in the backcountry to show where things had happened. But for me, I was the writer. I had the opportunity to interview all these folks in the community, and through that, I was able to meet more and more people. And so this gentleman is Theo Miners. Theo was actually the right-hand man for Doug Coombs in his first helicopter ski operation at Valdez. And Theo then went on and had his own helicopter ski operation, and he sadly was killed 2 years ago in a very tragic freak accident, not ski related. And so I feel very fortunate to have had the time to be able to speak with him. But when you talk to a man who, he in his own right was a really impressive individual, and the way that he talked about Coombs, the same thing. There was just this energy, and you look at this person and you can kind of get a sense. I never met Doug Coombs, but looking at these people and the way that their faces lit up and the way that they would talk to you and the way that they would look at you and in you, you just knew that something was left behind, and they would go to that place. I remember that exact moment when he's talking to me, he's telling me exactly about his time with Coombs and the Chugach. He said he was the master of the kingdom. And again, I'm not saying anything about writing a book. This is just me interviewing him about him. And he ended up starting talking about that. This is another interview I did. This gentleman here is Bill Briggs. He's the first man to ever ski the Grand Teton, the highest peak in Jackson Hole, 13,770 feet. It was a huge feat. He skied it on a fused hip, and it was an unbelievable achievement. And it was later in his career. Coombs went on to ski the Grand 9 times over his career, and his big claim to fame as far as the Grand's concerned is he was the first one to guide someone on skiing the Grand. So again, he's taking someone, bringing them there, imparting this confidence in them to achieve something that's, this man, first one in history to ski the Grand. So to have just a client do it was a pretty impressive thing. So I go through all these things, 2 years pass, and while this is all happening, the story of Doug Coombs is burning in my brain like a hot coal. I'm trying now to just get to the point where I can feel confident going out and speaking to people about this. And now we're going to get to the point of the energy. So finally I decide in 2012 that I'm going to pursue this project. I'm going to go public with it and start. And I knew that the first person that I needed to speak to before I talked to anyone, and there's hundreds of people in Jackson Hole that have spent time with Doug Coombs in the mountains. But I knew that the first person I had to speak to was his widow, his wife, Emily. So I drive from Boston to Jackson Hole. In my head, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to meet this woman. I'm going to tell her what I want to do. And throughout this whole drive, across the country, I'm thinking, okay, what am I going to say? What do you say to her that makes you worthy for her husband's story? And not even that, but also, how do you broach the topic? The whole thing was just mind-boggling to me, and I was scared, frankly. I was just scared to speak to her, not knowing what I would say. So I decided that I was going to meet Emily by way of a mutual friend. When I first moved to Jackson Hole, there was this old-timer in Jackson, this guy named Bill Maloney, who he and I went to the same college, 50 years apart, and when I moved to Jackson, I made the point of introducing myself. And when I was in his office, I saw the funeral memorial card to Doug's funeral in his office. So I said I assumed that he had some relationship with them. So I called up Bill. I said, Bill, I want to talk to you about something. Sure, let's go out skiing. So this is a guy, first of all, he's 80 years old. He's 100 days a year. It's like a testament to living a good life. He's a remarkable character. Anyway, so we're skiing, and we're in the gondola coming up. That's the trim, but we're in the gondola, and I say, Bill, kind of take my helmet off, put my goggles aside. This is the moment. I haven't said a word. Beyond my parents and my little brother, a word. Maybe to Mike, but beyond these 4 people, I hadn't said a word. And I said, Bill, I'm thinking about, I'd like to write a book about Doug Coombs. And he kind of looks at me as if I just asked for his daughter's hand in marriage. It was wonder and also kind of, but after the course of the day, we talked, and I kind of convinced him. And he said, okay, well, you know what? The person you have to talk to is Emily. And I'm thinking, bing, exactly. That's exactly who I want the introduction to. And so he says, let's go down. We'll buy some sandwiches, and then I'll call Emily. I'll call her. I haven't seen her in a while, but I'll call her. I said, that's great. So we go down. We're waiting for our sandwiches, And out of the corner of my eye, I just see someone walking in, and for some reason it's drawing my attention. And this person walks, and I see it's a woman, and then I see her walk right up to Bill, and she just taps him on the shoulder, and Bill turns, then kind of is taken aback, and he says, I can't believe you're here right now. Like, I was just about to call you. Like, this guy wants to write about Doug. We've been talking about you all day. And 3 years, waiting to meet this person. I'm there that day, deciding that I'm going to go public with the story. First time I've ever said anything about this. And this woman who's been in my mind for, years, is suddenly in front of me. And I just say, yeah, I do. That's all I could come up with. I mean, I was so just taken by this moment of, it's hard to explain. It's just, it's really affirming in one moment, and then it's also kind of awe-inspiring. And it's really easy, I think, for us to look at a moment like that and just mark it up as coincidence. And, wow, I was happy doing, it just kind of happened. But throughout my time pursuing this project, I realized that it is not a coincidence. There's an energy to people, and I believe it's the energy that's been guiding me, and it's the energy that brought me to Le Grave this winter. And now we're going to get there. I apologize for the big setup, but it's kind of important to understand what's it all about. So, Doug moved to Le Grave at the end of his life, and I knew that I had to go there. I needed to know what drew one of the most famous skiers in the world, what drew him out of obscurity, out of and all these mountain towns where he could have been treated like a king. What drew him to this small little French village called Le Grave? So I booked my ticket. I booked my ticket without really doing any research. Whenever I travel anywhere, I try not to read too much because I want to go in there with a clean slate. I want to learn as I go. But the one fact that I did know was that Doug was killed there. That was where the end of his life happened. And I thought, well, if this is where the greatest skier in the world died, then it's not, it's clearly a dangerous place. So I kind of do a little more reading, and I find out that Le Grave, which is in southeast France, in the Alps, Le Grave is, they basically installed this lift on this mountain just for summer tourist access. And they, a skier petitioned to have it used for the winter, just to ferry them up to the top and let them go out. And they ultimately let him do it, and he said, the skiing's amazing. But they didn't do anything as far as like developing it as a resort. They didn't put up any ropes. They didn't put up any, there's no ski patrol. It's basically just a lift to the backcountry. It's a lift to the big mountains. So when you get up the lift, it's crevasses, there's a big glacier, there's no avalanche mitigation, so if it snows a lot the night before, they don't throw any charges to mitigate that avalanche risk. It's a very intimidating place. And so this is starting to brew in my mind before I'm leaving, because I booked the ticket, not really thinking, okay, I'm going to Le Grave. I booked the ticket, and then when the next day I'm leaving, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to Le Grave. Like, I'm going to this place. Like, what is this going to be all about? So the bus pulls in after 2 planes, a bus and a train. Bus pulls into Le Grave. I get out of the bus, and the first thing you see, which is inevitable, is Le Mez, which is the main massif. Just this unbelievably aesthetic, but also very intimidating mountain, which you can see in the background. And I'm looking at this mountain, and I'm just thinking, like, am I even at the right place? Like, this does not look like a ski area. There's stretches of snow that end in a cliff, and there's a stretch of snow that ends in like a big serac. I mean, it's not like skiing as we understand it. I mean, it's just a rugged mountain that happens to have a lift. And as I'm watching this, I'm like looking and thinking, geez, this helicopter just right across the horizon and stops above the ski area and then descends down below this rock face, and a minute later it pops back up and then like right where it came from. And if you know anything about the mountains, about mountaineering or anything, you know that was a rescue. So I'm thinking, God, 5 minutes in Le Grave, I've already seen a rescue. I don't know anyone here. Like, the town is a one-road town, completely shuttered. And during the afternoons, nothing's open. I don't know where my apartment is. Like, I don't know anything. I've just traveled for 2 days, and I've just seen a rescue, and I ask myself the inevitable question that happens on any adventure: what the hell am I doing here? It's just kind of mind-blowing. But I did eventually find my apartment, which was a miracle in itself, because it was tucked away in a teeny little farming village above Le Grave. Le Grave is a town of 500 people. It's just a one-road town. There's about 3 restaurants, 2 bars. Everyone knows each other. It's a very interesting community. But that's what you're looking at every day. And I was in this village here, and that's known as Taras. And the reason I was living there was because that's where Doug Coombs lived with his wife and his son, David. So I rented a little apartment in the same neighborhood. And my reason for going was to do 2 things. My reason was to understand the circumstances around Doug Coombs' death, but also to understand the circumstances around his life. I want to know what it was like to live there. I want to know why he wanted to live there. Like, what was the appeal to live in this really remote, just completely obscure place with no comforts of a resort? I mean, there's just nothing that we like to have in these mountain towns. So that's what brought me there. But what the theme became early on was just fear. I experienced fear that I've only experienced riding boats through big waves and fog and being responsible for someone else's life. Fear haunted me for the first 3 weeks of being there. I didn't get on the mountain for the first week because I was hearing stories of the place. And anyone I talked to would really, it was not, they weren't blowing smoke. It was really dangerous. So this is my picture window. This is what I'm looking out to every single day. And you can't see in this image, but you can see the lift from my window. So every day I'd wake up and I'd make coffee. And I would look out the window and I'd pray that the lift wasn't running. I'd be like, I didn't want to go up there. I didn't know what is this day going to hold for me? I would be in my bed at night, in the safety of my bed, and tormented by fear. It was something I've never experienced before. I wouldn't want to relive it, but it was a theme of it. Now, the biggest first step in conquering my fear was to get on the mountain, because the first 5 days I was there, I just said, what is up there? Like, what is up there? Why is this place so frightening? And you can't go up there by yourself. 80% of the people that ski in Le Grave ski with a guide. So I thought, okay, I can either get a guide or I can seek out a friend. I chose the friend route, which turned out to be a good one. So to get from my apartment down to town, you had to ski down. So I skied down to town, and I'm looking for like a flag that's going to show me where I'm supposed to go. And there's this really gaudy K2 pub, which is like America transported right there. It looks like a piece of Vegas. It looks so weird in this place with like these really quaint little rock, cheese stores and wine shops, and this like gaudy K2, and I kind of ignored it at first. I thought I want to have the authentic experience, but then after, time of pointing out things blankly on the menu and getting crazy meals, I chose to go there. And I walked in, and first thing I see in the K2 bar is a ski along the wall with Doug Coombs right across the ski. And I say, well, it's a good sign. Looks like I'm in the right place. So I walk up to the bartender. I order a pint, and it's this guy right here, Christoph. He'd love to see himself blown up like this. So I walk up to him and, kind of start chewing the fat. And turns out he's from Jackson Hole, or he's from Belgium, but he just spent the season in Jackson Hole. And so I'm like, oh, there's my guide. Perfect. Like, this is great. He said, Rob, if I see you up there, I'll show you around. So in my head, I'm like, okay, you're going to see me up there, no doubt. So one day, I basically get all my gear, and I stake out the top of the mountain, take the lift up to the top of the mountain, and I'm sitting up there just waiting for him all day long. I figure if he doesn't show up, I'll just take the lift down. Because you can't ski down. I mean, I think it's really important to stress how this place is no joke. I mean, it's just the ski tracks could end in a cliff that you have to rappel down. It's like people walk around with harnesses to ski. They have ropes in their backpacks. There's ice axes. The whole thing is very intimidating just walking around, let alone being up there. So I see Christoph. I bump into him, and he agrees to show me down, and he ends up becoming a very good friend of mine, along with his roommate Ryan, a Kiwi, really nice guy. And those two guys kind of helped me not get over my fear, but put it in a place that I can deal with. And even after 3 weeks of them showing me around the mountain, it still was haunting to know that, well, let me paint the picture for you. We'd go to runs that were the deadliest, and not by choice. It just happened to be the fact that some of the runs that you take happen to be the deadliest because they're so close. You could just access them. So I did one run where 32 people had been killed, and we get in. I didn't know this at the time. They just said, "Oh, yeah, we'll do the Trifid, and he'll be fine." So everyone's kind of nonchalant about it. So we kind of pull through this. We get around this traverse where there's all rocks down here, and we get to this chute basically, and it's the steepest thing I've ever seen in my life. And the wind had buffed it, so now it's very fast. So a quick read of the situation was, if your ski were to just pop off, and I don't mean like come off your foot, I mean if your ski just went like that, you would fall directly to the bottom, either hit a rock or any other number of ways you get very, very injured. So you're kind of looking at it, and fear is just now taking your focus and making it like a laser beam. I mean, you're just so zoned in, and you know that everything you have to do at this moment has to be on. You know that you've got no room for error. You do one thing wrong, and it's it. And there's this amazing experience where, okay, so that focus, the fear turns your focus really sharp. You get through the run, which I did. I'm here. You get through the run, and you get down, and you experience this just unbelievable euphoria. Everything you've just kind of put yourself through channels and kind of morphs into something different, where you're kind of overcome by, like, oh my God, I did it. Everything tastes so good. The beer is so cold. Like, everything, life is great. Now I'm here. Like, this is great. Like, And then that gives way, for me anyway. I don't know if it gave way to other people, but for me it gave way to a sense of guilt. Because I just, you realize, I just put myself through that. I put myself in a position where I needlessly could have been killed. And I went through that day after day after day after day after day for 2 months. And someone would ask me, and I think it's a good question, well, why do it? Like, what's the point of doing it? You're there, you're talking to the people, like, you're seeing his life, What's the point of putting yourself in that position? And for me, the point was that I needed to understand why Doug Coombs would go every day. And I needed to understand what those risks were. And it wasn't that I enjoyed it. I'm not saying he did. But I needed to appreciate what that day-to-day was. And I needed to understand a little bit on what drew him to Le Grave and what drew him into the mountains. I learned what drew Doug Coombs to Le Grave, and one was the mountain. I mean, obviously, the mountain's boundless. And for a man who was constantly pushing the boundaries, for him to end up there at the end of his life was just a perfect part of the story to unroll like that. But what I also learned, which I think was more of the lesson for me living there, was it was the community of people that appealed to him. Doug Coombs, despite his fame, despite being on hundreds of magazine covers and ski films and really treated like a ski god in places, was the most unassuming human being. I mean, he was just a humble guy, loved to ski, was really good, liked to take other people into the mountains and show them a good time. It was very simple, wasn't complex. And so this community just treated him like a regular person. And I was very fortunate to become great friends, or I hope that they think I'm a great friend, but I thought they were great friends in this community. And they showed me a really amazing time and very genuine, honest, and thoughtful human beings just living in this small little community. One such individual was this gentleman right here, Joe Vallone. A little backstory on how Joe ended up in Le Grave. Joe Vallone was best friends with a skier named Chad Vanderham. And when Doug Coombs died, what happened was Doug was skiing with 3 other people. This woman, Christina Bloomquist, this gentleman, Matt Farmer, and Chad Vanderham. They were skiing down. Chad Vanderham was a protege to Doug. I mean, as close to family as you could get. And they were skiing down this couloir, a chute, and Chad went over a cliff. And Doug skied down to him and was looking over the edge, and he too went over the cliff. So Joe Vallone was Chad's best friend, and he stayed in Le Grave after the accident, and he's been there for 9 years now. And Joe Vallone, he became a friend of mine because of what I was doing, the story, and I was talking to him all the time and kind of interviewing him and seeing him at the bar. And in a town full of lions, like Joe Vallone was a pride all his own. It's like he's just the man. And one day we're talking, just kind of kibitzing, and he says, "Yeah, Rob, would you ever want to go skiing? Like, I'd like to take you out." And the opportunity from this guy who takes out big film crews, and I mean, he is the man in Le Grave. I knew like that was such a amazing opportunity, and yet in my head I'm thinking, I don't want to go out there. Like, what are we gonna do? Like, I just started getting comfortable here. Like, what are we doing? So my response like squeaked out of me, "Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, I'll look for you." But now I got like my head down, not trying to bump into Joe Vallone because I'm thinking, where is he taking me? So one day I got an email from him, and he says, "Rob, today's the day. I got some time off. Bring your harness." I'm like, "Bring a harness? Like, what are we doing? Bring a harness?" And I'm like, "Oh, I don't have a harness. Can't go." Write him an email back like, "Sorry, Joe, no harness. I wish I could come with you, but I'm gonna have to sit this one out. I don't want to yuck your yum today." So I didn't hear from him. I'm like, good. So I'm walking to the left. I'm like about to put my tag in, and I hear my name screamed across the parking lot. And I like step back. I'm literally just right there. And I step back, and I see this figure standing in the parking lot, like with something over his head. And I'm like, who the hell is that? "Rob, I got you a harness. I'll meet you up there." And I'm like, oh, geez, like committed now. So I meet Joe at the top. He throws me the harness. Says it's a bit of a diaper, but it'll hold you. I'm like, oh, great. I'm like threading on the harness, thinking what's going to happen. Where are we going? Joe's unloading his pack. He pulls out a rope. He pulls out an ice axe. He pulls out ice screws. He pulls out his harness. Like, it just keeps on coming. It's like a clown car of backpacks, like, And I'm thinking, oh, geez, like, I don't want, like, I got a week left, So he tells me we're doing the classic. We're doing Levoot. I heard of Levoot. It's a very highly trafficked run. When anyone goes there, a guide will take you there. So it's not like a very, very risky. It is risky, but it's not like a crazy run to do. It's like, oh, okay, Now, to do Levoot, give you a sense of it, you have to ski over a glacier. So you're basically skiing over snow walls, over crevasses. And then you come to a point of rappel, and then you rappel down into a couloir, and then you ski from there. So the whole thing was completely foreign to me. Like skiing with a harness on, not my bag. Skiing, rappelling into something crazy. And yet I was in the care of this man, so I figured if I'm going to do it, might as well do it. So we get there, and Joe's like ringing up the rope, like doing his thing, getting everything together, I'm like, yeah, putting the thing on, like get the skis on. And he turns to me, he says, I've always wanted to ski this. And I'm like, what? Yeah, I want to ski this. Like, you've never skied this? It's like, no. I mean, ski this without a rope. And I said, I looked at him, thinking that he's kidding, and then realizing he's completely, he's being completely serious. And, I asked the obvious question, well, is it possible? And he says, there's only about 5 people who've ever done it, and Doug Coombs is one of them. So I'm standing there, having just heard this, and I'm looking at this, like, impossible. I mean, it's a cliff, It just doesn't look like it's anywhere to ski down. And I'm just, it's kind of like, I guess the best way to describe it is there's old footage when George Foreman used to hit the heavy bag. He used to hit the heavy bag, and when he'd be done, they'd leave this massive indentation in the heavy bag, and you realize his power. Like, his power was superhuman. And that was the same experience for me. Looking at this face, I said, wow, like he was a superhuman. I mean, this just didn't make any sense. The fact that he could do this was just profound to me. So Joe lowers me in, which was interesting, and a pretty interesting experience. And get to the bottom, and then it's just skiing. You're skiing in a couloir, and there's me, not nearly as good as Doug Coombs, but still holding my own. So the end of the day, again, having that experience of like total euphoria, just completely invigorated, feeling like I conquered my fear. And then I was also in the presence of a man who was the legacy of Doug Coombs, and watching him work with me in the mountains and seeing that like he was a guide, and I understood what it was like for him to be a guide and be in the care of somebody. So Joe says to me, that was a good end of the day. Let's take the last lift up and just hang out at the top of the mountain and just, I'll play the guitar and it'll be great. And I'm thinking, oh yes, like glory lap, I was like, this is easy. I don't have to do anything more craziness. Like, this is great. So we get up there and Joe starts playing, and I'm just kind of taking in the whole scene. He's playing the guitar, and it almost sounds like it's a tribute to his fallen friend. And I'm looking outside the window. Like, out the window, there's these blackbirds kind of floating in the air. And it's just a really beautiful scene, and I'm kind of taken by it all. I'm just thinking, wow, this is such a gift. Like, I've had such a great day, and, it's fantastic. So in walks a group of people, and Joe kind of like nods to him and says to me, well, have you spoken to Christina? And I said, no. And then I realized who Christina was. Christina was the last person with Doug in the accident. She was the one that was doing CPR on him. And I knew at that moment that I had to speak to this woman, that this is why I was here. Came all this way, and I had to speak to this woman. To find out the circumstances of Doug Coombs' death, I needed to speak to her, if anybody. And so Joe kind of goes over, introduces us to the group, which this project is, as far as conquering fear, I'm not much of a personal person. Like, I'm not a person that would just go up and like engage a group. And so to have to just go over and cold talk to these people was, its own thing. And I'm kind of looking at her and thinking, okay, I have no need to speak to this person. And she's looking off and just seems completely uninterested in talking to me. I'm thinking, oh, geez, like, I don't know what's going to happen, So for the next 3 weeks, I'm in pursuit of her. I'm trying to get a moment with her. I don't even know what I'm going to talk about. Like, I just know that I need to speak to her. Something's telling me that I have to speak to her. I need to know what happened. I'd read the accident report. I knew every detail I could find, but I needed to talk to someone who was there. And it's coming to the end of my trip. There's 1 day left. This is the last day I could possibly see this woman. And so I go with the intent of like, okay, I'm going to meet her today. Like, I need to talk to her. So I do just like I did with Christoph. I stake out the top of the mountain. I get to the top early in the day, and I stay there all day long. Just sat there waiting for her to come out the door. And hours are ticking by, and I'm getting a sunburn, and just like, oh, this isn't going to happen. So it's getting late in the day, and I say, okay, you know what? I'm just going to go for one run. I'm getting restless. Like, shake out my legs a little bit. I'm going to ski down to the bottom and, I'll take the last lift up. And get to the lift and get in there. And I'm feeling like I'm a failure. Like, I just came all this way, been here for 2 months. There's one person I need to talk to, and I haven't talked to her. I haven't made it happen. Like, I'm really feeling like I failed. Like, I've done everything. I put myself out here, and I've failed. And so I get in the gondola on myself, and I say, Doug, like, make this happen. Make this happen. I need this. Like, I'm here. I've come here all this way. I'm following your story. I need this to happen. And, at this point, there's been so many of these instances of feeling his energy that I know that this is true. So I say, make this happen. Get to the top of the mountain. The door's open. And she sat A1, like the first person that I see, sat right there. And at the moment I saw her, I just thought, I didn't think anything. She sat right in that chair, and I'm coming out. And so I see her, and I'm like not thinking about the fact that moments before I just asked for Doug Coombs to bring this woman to me. She just sat there, and I just thought, okay, I've been looking for you for 3 weeks. It's like it's game time, you know? So I get up, and, you know, I know that this is not an easy thing to talk about. So I just said, you know, I don't have any specific questions, but I'm leaving tomorrow, and you know why I'm here. And if there's anything you want to tell me, like, I'm here to hear you. I'm here to listen. So I sat with her, and we looked out at the mountain. The mountain was beautiful. It was like a gorgeous, gorgeous day. The mountain was just like perfect in the sky. And I'm sitting there, and in her own time, she went through and told me everything that happened that day, things I had never heard before. Gave me every detail. And listening to her, I'm in that same state of focus as if I'm skiing a no-fall zone. Like, I'm listening so intently, my ears are wide open, and every word just coming in, and I'm just trying to put it in my memory bank because I can't record her, I can't write it down while she's talking. Like, it's such a moving moment. So I'm just listening really intensely, and it's a very, very moving experience for her. I can feel her energy coming off, and like she's clearly having trouble telling me this whole account, and she gets through it. It's about a 45-minute conversation, and I kind of sense that there's a natural conclusion to our talk, and she kind of like sits back, and I kind of sit back, and she's just totally exhausted from telling me all these really intimate details. And I sit back, and I look up at the mountain, and it all starts to dawn on me. You know, it dawns on me that I just asked Doug Coombs to make this woman appear, and she appeared. Like, couldn't have been more convenient. It was like in the perfect spot. It dawned on me that this day, the actual day, what the mountain looked like, was exactly like the day of the accident. It was a beautiful spring day, gorgeous blue. It was amazing. It dawned on me that this was probably the place where they met right before that fateful run. And it was the same time. It was 4 p.m. It was the same time, same spot, this place. It dawned on me that I was a kid in Boston, Massachusetts, 10 years ago, watching ski films, looking at a world that just didn't even exist to me. And now I'm there, talking to the last person who had her hands on my ski hero, and I'm having this experience with her. And all these things are happening, and this big swarm of blackbirds just comes up and does this unbelievable aerial formation right over the restaurant where they'd be meeting. And I'm watching this, and it's just the most stunning thing. And they say that the blackbirds in the Alps are the souls of fallen skiers. And there was this moment of everything I'd done, all the helicopter rides, all the rappelling, all the skiing avalanche terrain, nothing compared to that moment of being with this woman, sharing time with her, and her telling and sharing this story with me, this very intimate thing. Now, all these things are very deeply personal to me. These are things that are deeply personal to those that I shared them with, and these were not things I planned on talking about when I first was asked to do this talk. And there's a reason for that. So I got contacted by Marjan halfway through my trip, and you know, she contacted me and said, "You want to come tell your story? You know, how does April 24th sound?" And I said, "Yeah, that sounds great. Like April 24th, like any day in April. Sure, that sounds great." So then she kind of contacted me 5 days later and said, "How about, you know, actually I double booked. April 24th is not good." She can attest to this true story. "April 24th is not good. How does April 3rd sound?" And I'm thinking, yeah, I mean, another day in April, April 3rd. Like, I'm kind of in the mountains, like, just hammering out emails super quick. So April 3rd sounds fine, good to go. Like, I'm going to be kind of busy, that's fine. April 3rd. So it was only a few days ago when I was preparing for this talk that, you know, I realized April 3rd, today, this day, is the day Doug Coombs died. And I'm supposed to be here talking about this, telling you guys about the energy of a person. And when I realized the significance of this day, I contacted his wife. And I said, you know, can't believe, like, can you imagine this has just happened? You know, like, I've been brought to give this talk on this day, you know? And she said, well, reach into your soul and the words will come. And that's what I've done. And the message that I'm here to tell you, I believe that I'm supposed to tell you, is that all of us has an energy to us. We all possess it. It's the energy that connects us. As Einstein said, energy is not created or destroyed, it's just transformed. So when someone leaves, their energy is left behind. And if you listen very closely, and you look very hard, and you seek them, they'll find you. Thank you.
I have chills. I don't know about anyone else in the audience, but Rob,
Thanks.
spectacular. I'm moved. I'm feeling it in my heart right now. I'm feeling it in my mind and my soul. And I just want to open this up to you all. First of all, let's all take a deep breath because we just went on a very, very special journey. Energy is transferred, and Rob, you just transferred a lot of amazing energy to us. So thank you for that. While we have Rob here, while we all put this special time aside in our days to spend and listen to this story, does anyone have any questions? Is there anything that you'd like to know or perhaps just reflect on while we're together? Yes.
I guess I'm curious as to if his son has followed in his footsteps.
Yeah, his son David is well, he's a fantastic kid. He's a really, really nice little boy, 11 years old, and he is a phenomenal skier. And actually, I'm glad you asked that question because there's a really important thing to say about that. His wife, Emily, has started the Doug Coombs Foundation, which is basically taking kids and giving them the means to basically do what I did as a kid, learn to ski in a program. So David is really involved with that. He's kind of the star of the program, but it's a really beautiful legacy. And you know, the thing about, I could talk about Doug forever, but what his magic was able to teach people to ski and bring them into the mountains, and that's what this program is doing, and that's what his son is continuing to do. And he's a really special boy. So.
Great question. Anyone else? Yes, Paula.
So I'm anxious to hear about your book. Were you able to continue writing it, and have you published it? What's the status?
Yeah, no, thank you for asking that. I haven't published it yet. It's still in the works. I'm about a third of the way through. It's really a matter of having these experiences and seeing these places before I can do it. It's been one of the most big undertakings I've done. So it's coming, but it should be, if all goes to plan, it will be released right around now in 2 years.
Rob, I have one last question for you. This has been a multi-year experience. What would you say if you had to distill it in a lesson? Do you think that Doug and or life has taught you a particular lesson through all of this?
Yeah, there are many lessons, I'd say, but I think that the big one that I'm learning is kind of what I was talking about as far as energy and people, and that sharing time and space with people is really the most important thing. And that's kind of the biggest adventure in life, is the people you meet and those moments. I think that we live in a world that so often can become ordered off from one another. And I think through some of these experiences and also seeing the energy of a human being in someone else and then having you feel it yourself, realize that you have an opportunity with everyone to share that time and space and create that energy. So I do. That's, I think, the biggest lesson for me.
Ladies and gentlemen, here's to creating energy. If you have more questions, we'll meet up with Doug, or with, wow, with Rob at the very end. But for now, a round of applause and thank you all for being here.